Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.
At round 9, just a couple of weeks ago, opportunities were missed by almost everybody. A non-start for a holiday for Volta Lux, for Jacob Reed a non-finish on the opening lap of the race, and for a front wing change and drama all around, the championship leader Eduardo Radice unable to capitalise and stuck with just a 13th place. The margin still remains up there at 45 championship points, but it's now Florian Kammeyer who is making that charge back. At round 10 of the iRacing Grand Prix Tour, we head ourselves to Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and to here, the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, which has been a place for time and time and time again that has been a true test as a semi-permanent race circuit. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone in week 13 here on iRacing and SimSpeed TV. My name is Jake Sperry. Joining me alongside for this one, not Taylor Mills as she's over in France at the moment, Adam Reed joining me along for the ride here today. Dan Yeaman is in the production truck as we get things sorted. Adam, we take a little bit of an understanding here around this circuit. We know how important this place has been time and time again, but it offers a difference when it comes to racing here as they go overall and battle for it, because this is such a long, high-speed circuit with the technical opening two sectors.
Hi Jake. Yes, this is going to be such an interesting circuit. Of course, a street circuit that has very, very narrow margins. You're really balancing the car between the walls. And of course, you've really got to get your car in the zone and very much be able to survive around this place. It's a very, very technical circuit when you really think about it. But overall, I think our drivers are in for a very, very challenging full-length race.
Yeah, just the 4.3 kilometers out here, clockwise rotation and 14 turns of it. And keep your eyes peeled for Le Pangle, turn 10, the hairpin corner, the run along Casino Straight and into the final chicane of 13 and 14, which houses the fabled Wall of Champions here as part of this circuit, which was generated as part of the Olympics, which was so important back when Montreal hosted that in the 1960s, the old rowing venue that is there. But what is quite unique here, Adam, 3 DRS activation zones.
It's going to be so important to be able to keep within the DRS zone. Of course, 1 second between you and the car ahead of you, and car ahead of you, and you will be able to get that DRS. And of course, down the activation 2 and 3 is going to be so important. If you can get a good run of Le Pangle and then into towards Virage Senna, that's going to be so important. If you can potentially make an overtake, but it's going to be pretty tight down towards that first corner. That gets ever narrower every single time we go here.
Yeah, it's double dip when it comes to getting what you want in that regard when you get that slipstream sorted with the DRS, and this is why it's one of the funnest places to watch. 5,414 strength of field here today. It's one of the higher ones that we've seen over the course of this season, and some maybe familiar and unfamiliar names finding themselves in for racing today. But let's talk championship as it stacks up at the moment. We follow with 2 separate championships. First, the iRacing official standings as they go, which counts for every single race out there. Over 1,100 drivers have looked to try and put a single time in on the board, or a single race together here, Adam, and it's clear that Eduardo Rodis has that at the moment, but a lot of change after last week.
Absolutely. I think there's going to be some really, really intriguing racing. Of course, 4 drivers within the 2,000 points region. It really does seem like a lot of these drivers are very much going to be going into it. Very much going to be rare to try and get a podium. I think that's the best place to go for it, especially with somewhere where it's going to be so tight to try and make moves. Of course, Kent Nielsen is going to be at his home race there. The Canadian sits 8th at this moment in time, could potentially maybe even walk away from the weekend in 5th place, but it could be a very, very tough one for him.
And let's take a look at the SimSpeed Championship standings. These follow the official points that are found in the Formula 1 World Championship for just top split as it goes. Eduardo Rodis on top, but 35 points the margin. Florian Kammerer looking to chase that down with the hunt of both Jacob Reed and Volta Lux tied on 108. They're 3rd and 4th. Emil Bernsdorf and James Byrne 5th and 6th. A good return to form from James Byrne last time out, with Jorge Martinez and Jason Anderson 7th and 8th, with Emil Lundell finding himself in 9th position after a big gain with the victory last time out, and Joseph Loke also with 1 victory this season in 10th position on 25 championship points. 48 drivers have made a start in top split action with us here on SimSpeed TV, and we are looking forward to the racing that goes through, because qualifying is currently underway. They've got 8 minutes to set a time, 2 laps to do so, 300 105 kilometers worth of racing today, Adam, and they must use 2 different tyre compounds. This is one of those circuits that you sit down and say, who has won here over the course of years around this track? Filippo Grandi in 2022, Marcel Fassbender in 2023, and Jacob Reed, the 2-time champion last year.
Absolutely, I think there's going to be some really top drivers in this split for sure. There's going to be so much to take into consideration every single time. We're very much going to be keeping an eye on some of the drivers. I'm really intrigued to see what strategy is going to be used as well. See their pit stop lost time is about 20 to 23 seconds. So a lot of our drivers are going to be very much trying to push and see if they can potentially extend those gaps. We'll really have to see what they're all about. But I think to be able to set the early pace here is going to be so important, and then leave everyone else to go and do catch up.
Here in iRacing, we use the C2, C3 and C4 tyres for the entirety of the season. That's what the tyres are modelled on. And so in 2025, for the real world, they will use the C4 as a hard tyre, which in our race is a soft tyre, which gives you a great indication of what we're dealing with tyre life-wise, in the sense that it will most likely be a one-stop strategy here today. So keep that in the back of the mind as these drivers all look to put strategy into mind here as we get ourselves ready for qualifying, or in the midst of qualifying at the moment. This is the data set that we've been able to pull together to see who's managed to get the potential fastest. Of course, we always take the data from Volta Lux, who very kindly gives us his data, which says 28 laps on the mediums to go 42 laps on the soft, so a reverse strategy, so to speak. But then winning strategies that we have seen over last year, and of course the early split at 10 o'clock today, very similar, 32 to 34 laps on a medium tyre here, Adam, to go 38 or 36 on the soft.
It does seem very interesting from those tyre strategies. You really think that the medium tyres would potentially go longer, but of course you really want to be maximising those softs, especially maybe toward the end. It'll be really interesting to see who does kind of the opposite, starts on those soft tyres and decides to go onto the medium. And we now enter this qualifying session into the very late stages. And we're here, Johan Hart in the Frenchman in the number 1, who's carrying that speed all the way down the back straight, and he'll head in towards that very infamous Wall of Champions chicane.
Yep, and number 1 because he's got 10,450 iRating. He is absolutely massive. A former iRacing World Championship Grand Prix Series driver, and can only go 3rd fastest with that attempt, a 1:13.9 behind the championship leader and the reigning champion, who are 1 and 2 at the moment. Jacob Reed currently the fastest. Eduardo Radice in 2nd. Robert Ridgway has only this time to set his qualifying lap time. He's on his 2nd lap and really struggling there, going through that that 3rd chicane out there, 8 and 9 over to Lepangle at turn number 10. You are on a tightrope through that 3rd chicane.
You absolutely are. You saw how bumpy it was on the entry in towards turn number 10. The car just oscillating underneath, and really just trying to get every single ounce of braking performance that he could. Ridgway going to just charge to the line here, see if he can potentially put a lap together, but he dips his left wheel onto the grass and tries to just nurse his car through, but the back end complains for under Ridgway's foot. He'll carry it to the line, and well, he puts his car, I'm not entirely sure if that was an improvement. He'll put it 18th there, so not an ideal position there for Robert Ridgway, the American driver. We now switch to the Israeli down there on the 10th row.
Yes, Adam Ashilzada, who is out of qualifying lap. So that will, in fact, be that here today for drivers looking to qualify, which will mean that we are getting ourselves set for racing action, as the grid will stack up then as follows for us. It will be car number 2 on pole position, the 2-time reigning champion, Jacob Reed, who will get that pole position, and for him, only his 2nd pole position of the season. Eduardo Radice joins him on the front row, with Johan Hart and James Byrne there on the 2nd row of the grid. Volta Lux, who is tied on points with Jacob Reed, will have to start from 5th, with George van Rensburg in 6th position alongside. Then it's Florian Kammeier, who had himself a strong showing last time out to pick up a podium, with Nick Burke in 8th position. Eric Bursma will go from 9th, making it an all-US top 10, 9th and 10th, 5th row, with Dennis Branch alongside alongside him with Adam Webb and Ben Ford on row number 6. Over to 13th and 14th, where you've got Vladimir Shumilov in 13th and Kent Nielsen in 14th position, with Victor Alad starting from 15th, the Brazilian, and Jason Green, ever consistent, but 16th place will be a start here. It's then Mark Van Dalen and Robert Ridgway who are on the 9th row of the grid, leaving just Edward Apariari and Adam Ashelzada then to make up this field. No Paul O'Regan here today, which is a real shame. We always love seeing Paul out here racing, but unable to with us here today. But these drivers know they are in for 70 laps and they've got to get themselves set and situated. 2 minutes to grid up, and already a minute and a half of that has disappeared. A former pro stripe in the iRacing World Championship Grand Prix Series on the 2nd row, Johan Harf. A pro stripe when it came to the Turn Racing Grand Prix iRacing Series, Jacob Reed on the front, and he won here, of course, 1 year ago on that legendary streak of 8 consecutive race wins. Will he have enough to hold off the championship leader, Eduardo Radice? A couple of cars we wait for then at the back of the field. One is Robert Ridgway, who populates, and the other one will be Victor Awad, who will choose to decide to start from pit lane then for today's action. Lights on here from the circuit, Gilles Villeneuve. Lights are out, and we are underway, and Jacob Reed doesn't get the greatest start in the world, and now he'll be swarmed. 3 wide, they're going to go into turn 1. Round the outside will try the likes of one Eduardo Radice, but it is Johan Harth who has got the best start of the lot and jumps immediately into the race lead. Reed is second, Radice is now third, looks already up into P4 as they dive into turns 3 and 4 for the first time. A clean start, everyone on mediums and everybody getting away unscathed.
Oh, it's going to be pretty tight there off the 5 red lights. You saw there 3 wide in toward turn number 1. That's always risky business, but it's Johan Harth, the Frenchman, who's managed to get away at a solitary pace. He carries that speed all the way down toward the next chicane, and he's just got to try now build that gap out towards his next stint.
He certainly will do, and he'll be looking at trying to break 1 second. He's got 2 laps to do so here in this Mercedes, but he runs deep into Lepangle, and that puts Jacob Reed right behind. But there's the launch off of the exit, just slightly missing the braking zone. Little lunge down the inside by the orange machine there, and look at that. Oh, they're getting together. Kent Nielsen and Mark Van Dalen end up colliding, and they're going to drop all the way to the back of the field, and they've got to be so careful about how they continue there. It's such a choke point. Wowee, Kent Nielsen finding himself there with Mark Van Dalen on the opening lap. Van Dalen is going to hit the pits, not with damage, but ultimately they'll be for a new front wing. Adam Ashelzada also jumps into the pits, you'd indicate for a front wing. George Van Rensburg, though, in 6th, eyeing up 5th. Front 4 starting to break away in their own respective packs, but for right now, Van Rensburg, the one chasing here on the brakes into 6 and 7.
Absolutely, they're still just trying to get into a bit of a rhythm. Of course, cold tyres, cold brakes, cold everything. It's still a little bit of a challenge for everyone here. They really try and find the limits here at this circuit. Gilles Villeneuve on one of the islands in Montreal, really looking to build that tyre temperature, potentially find their own battles. And I think eventually you just got to try and find a rhythm. I think that's the main thing you have to be doing around this circuit. That's going to be so important. They carry the speed out of that Lepangle hairpin and on towards the back straight, and of course I believe DRS should be enabled next lap. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sperry.
Yeah, well, that is correct, and we will see that they will get that triple load of DRS1, which will be going through the early section of the circuit. 1 a little bit later, and a fastest lap there, purple on the timing screen there for Johan Harth, who sets himself a 1:16.6 and breaks the second away from Jacob Reed early, who's going to have to work really hard to chase this down. Track conditions then on the bottom right corner of your screen, 42 degrees track temperature here. It's a hot one, and they'll be dealing with understeer.
Oh, that's going to be a little bit iffy there. Of course, it's also about nursing your tyres. You don't want to be absolutely ruining them within your first stint. Otherwise, you may find yourself having to make a two-stop. I do wonder if there's any two-stops in the minds of any of these drivers, just because there's 70 laps to go about this circuit, and it kind of depends on your driving style. It also depends on how you go about this, and I'm really interested to see how they're going to go about it. It's hard from Reed, from Radis, from Lux, and then James Byrne completing that top 10. But overall, the closest, they're looking still pretty close here, but the gaps are starting to open up and form up as Hart and Reed go in their little pod there as a front two.
Yeah, taking a look at that rear wing, as flat as you like for your championship leader, Eduardo Rodis. That is very much looking at trying to get as much as you can out of that, as skinny as possible to get as much drive as you possibly can, with Lux behind, with Byrne and with Van Rensburg all sitting there and looking to try and put themselves in. Car off the road is Ben Ford, who's gone straight on at the Virage Senna. It was battling with Vladimir Shumilov for the last lap, and I think he just had to abandon ship because Shumilov had the line that he wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he also potentially had a bit too much rearward brake bias, I should say, so forced the car to lock up. Unfortunately, we do have a replay of this. I think this might be this is Ken Nielsen, of course, the Canadian driver, heading in towards the hairpin. Oh, just shutting the door on Mark Van Dalen. They're getting very close. Oh, a hit there from behind. I wonder who that was. And there you go. There was the collision between Kent and Van Dalen. Really unfortunate there between the two. They completely dropped back.
Yeah, so that was the issue that you found there, the bottleneck on the opening lap. So Mark Van Dalen finding that collection. But this was Ben Ford looking to try and make that move. Angled out for that final chicane, decided against it, stuck in a bit of a DRS train at that point in time. But then as they all swarmed over to one side, Ford moving over, having to thread the needle with Nick Burke serving a slowdown penalty by the looks of it. But then trying to turn the corner, decided it was better to abandon ship and take the slowdown penalty rather than fight for the position. So Ben Ford has dropped a little bit of time, but there is still work to be done as far as this race goes. Only two drivers on the softs now, those who pitted on the opening lap. They surely will be looking at a two-stop race from here.
Absolutely. You can't go, you can't really do 68 laps on a set of soft tyres. It would be
there's a car in trouble.
Miracle.
There's a car in trouble. It's Adam Webb who's around, and that is come out of turn 7, turn backwards here as he now looks to try and bring himself around flick spin to go back the right way again, and ultimately a little bit red-faced will be the number 15 machine.
Oh, that's so unfortunate there. I think Gish gave it a boot full of throttle out of the right-hander, and unfortunately the back end did not like that and spun around on him. It looks like we got a replay of it. There is Adam Webb. He was down in a pretty lowly position down in the midfield, and yeah, just the rear, just complaining and not liking his inputs there on the throttle pedal. Wow, who was that? Just thinning the needle. That was Dennis Branch, the American driver. Of course, not too far away from Canada for him. Looks like we're going to get an onboard here of Dennis Branch down in towards the chicane, in toward the left, driver's eye view almost on the shoulder, and you just see the car facing the other way, and you just have to hold your breath and just go, whew, made it past that one.
Yeah, it's pick a lane at that point and hope that you pick correctly. So Dennis Branch managed that and was able to hold station and continue on in this race. Our focus now into a really tight battle. This is the recovering Ben Ford. He's not done with Vladimir Shumilov here in this battle. It's Club Slovakia. Well, instead of clubs, it's now flags that we play with here in iRacing. It's Slovakia right now. And Nick Burke deciding to go for iRacing as a flag, which will default to American. If you choose that you don't want to show your flag, you can be Club iRacing out there for everybody to know. So ultimately for Vladimir Shumilov, he loses the place. Ben Ford moves forward, but now you get a double dose of DRS along the straight. So you're able to claw it back, but you can see there the difference of the dirty air as you go onto the power, how much of a difference it makes. We got to change for 5th and 6th position because George Van Rensburg has just got through on James Byrne.
And also Jacob Reed is at the fastest lap of the race, albeit he has dropped back to about it was over 1.5 seconds, but yeah, that's really seemed to be dicing between 1.3 and 1.6. So we'll have to really see if that starts closing up. You see it just dice go from about 1.3, then goes up to 1.4, then gets back to that 1.5. So really just staying at a very similar pace there. But Jacob Reed, I think, is just happy to sit there in second place. You know, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, not a sprint, they say. And we look at the battle for fifth between George van Rensburg and James Byrne. Byrne, of course, managed to get past van Rensburg before the Dutchman managed to repass there. That was a move we saw about half a lap ago. But they're looking to be jostling there for that top 5 position.
Well, you can say not quite Dutch. It used to be Dutch, but of course the Dutch colonies came to South Africa, and that is why George van Rensburg is part of Club South Africa at this moment. You've got James Byrne right behind. Of course, it was van Rensburg through on that last lap, but now James Byrne will get the DRS and will make that change. Stuck at 300 kilometers an hour as George van Rensburg. Byrne was really close to committing to trying to dive down the inside. Thinks better of it, but gets another straight to try and make it happen. It got up to 319 clicks on the straight, close again, but not quite close enough to make that happen. And I keep my eyes at the front of this field because it has just had that gap decrease again down to just 1.1 seconds now at the front.
I wonder if that was a little bit of a mistake there from the Frenchman Johan Hart. But I just wanted to ask you, Jake, do you want to be in this battle? Maybe change your strategy from a one-stop to a two-stop, get yourself in a bit of clean air, or do you want to be trying to potentially pull yourself toward the likes of Walter Lux in fourth and Eduardo Radis in third? See what you think on that one.
Well, I think there's not enough tyre deck to go to a two-stop strategy here today, so I expect most, if not all, drivers will think that the one-stop is better, even if they are stuck in a little bit of dirty air, and that's a big wide line taken by van Rensburg, who will now look to try and attack off the exit once again, really trying to open up that steering, apply the power as quickly as possible along the Casino Straight. We start to go 313 kilometers an hour right now, and again, Byrne choosing to lift out as he goes through one corner, two corner, now looking to try and attack again off of the exit once more, moving forward. Another fastest lap for Jacob Reed, who now pulls himself within half a second, but Byrne not quite close enough.
They're still just sitting back there. Meanwhile, two cars going into battle. This is Shumilov ahead of Burke and Branch, and this is a tight battle there for P9. It seems like. Meanwhile, up at the top of the lead there, that gap has now declined down to 7, now 0.6 of a second. So a lot of battles going on out on track here. So this race is still not short of action around a very tight street circuit. But we're currently looking at the trio trying to fight for the latter end of the points here.
Yeah, there's battles everywhere. Nielsen, Ridgway and Webb. Of course, Nielsen and Webb work very closely together as teammates, as it were, and Adam Webb keeps himself close. But I want to go to the front of the field because for the first time, Jacob Reed is able to sit in DRS, and now he will look to use it as much as he can as he moves on to 318 kilometers an hour through that final chicane, and really trying to push here is Jacob Reed. But will Johan Hart have anything to say about it? It's covered this time here on the run to the Virage Centre, but these two drivers combined have about 17,000 iRating between them when it comes to open formula, and for the moment it's Jacob Reed who has to sit behind the two-time champion. Most points in the series, most wins, heavy over the curb goes Johan Hart.
Oh, he's very much trying to keep himself all together, knowing that there is a highly ranked driver in the form of Jacob Reed right behind him. DRS down this back straight. Jacob Reed is probably trying everything he possibly can to put himself within the tyre tracks of Johan Hart. But you can see how difficult it is. Hart having to use all of the circuit as Nielsen and Adam Webb both coming in for their pit stop, but just still focusing in towards Le Pagna. And I think Jacob Reed's going to try and get the better exit here, but just not able to. Might be down towards that first corner. You never know, Jake.
Well, that might be the place where you'd expect it to happen, and Jacob Reed's got to follow really intently. He's already saving with the energy light there, harvesting, the rain light harvesting on the back, indicating that the energy recovery system is there, going as close as he dares towards that final wall on the outside, able to keep it out of the wall, but it will cost the move as they go through. They're already 6 seconds clear of Eduardo Rodis, the championship leader, and Walter Lux, who is never too far out of the podium or 4th position. It seems like he's been there all season long, and he has been when it's come to his rounds. But for the moment, Johan Harth being put under a little bit of pressure then here for the first time in a little while, and that we certainly see. Nick Burke, by the way, in the pits because he has had damage, and he will be out, first retiree of this race, and he just about kept it out of the Wall of Champions, but he took Dennis Branch with him.
That was a very unfortunate accident between the two of them. I definitely wonder what will happen there. A meatball flag here for Dennis Branch. So the American driver, yeah, he's not going to be very happy with his race so far. He's running up in the mid-pack, running in P11. Points were just there, but if he needs to come into the pits, then he absolutely needs to make that happen. Nick Birch, unfortunately there for him, he is very much out of this Grand Prix just after what is... only a couple more, only a little percentage of the race. Let's have a look and see what happened here in towards chicane. A big jump there from Birch, and the rear just goes round. Oh, and there is the hit that broke the suspension and broke broke everything there on the left-hand side, and unfortunately will retire from the session there. And of course, it was that famous, infamous Wall of Champions there that didn't kind of caught him out. This is on board with Dennis Branch. We'll get to see the smack there. And as he goes round, yeah, he's not really expecting it until that last moment where he has to pull over to the left. But by then, he's at a 90-degree angle facing the pit wall, and there's not really any way he can go.
No, he was stuck in a place where he had no returns. Now, this is James Byrne who is there, and he's doing all right. And Dennis Branch will have to roll into the pits, and he's got required damage that he has to get repaired before he can go back out and attack again. But for the moment, Dennis Branch, this might be his day done. He had damage, of course, to the front wing, and I would expect the suspension as well. Big, wide line in, looking to try and attack and diamond off the exit. Both of them, Harth and Reed, trying to play the same game in that regard. And once more, it becomes a duel on the straight that we start to see as Jacob Reed looks to close and looks to the inside. It's covered by Johan Harth, who just about holds it steady, using his one move very cleverly against Jacob Reed there, who will be a little bit perturbed at the fact that that move was so aggressive and late as it was. But for Jacob Reed, he knows how quick and how aggressive and how ruthless you have to be to get to 10K in that iRacing club. It used to be a myth 3 years ago. Now you've got a handful of drivers, about 20 of them find themselves as permanent residents.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so tough getting that iRacing, but they've actually managed to do it. And here they are, fighting up at the top of the field here. Dennis Branch still in the pit lane, unfortunate for him. But we look back at the Battle of the Ford. We spoke about pretty much earlier in this race about George van Rensburg and James Byrne potentially trying to force their way up the field higher towards Walter Lux, and that's exactly what they've done. They've managed to find Walter Lux here, but they're now using DRS. There goes Byrne up ahead of the number 9, and it will now fly on through and hopefully look to try and catch up to Walter Lux. But I wonder what how much power they've got in terms of ERS. They haven't got DRS. That will go to George van Rensburg down this back straight. But yeah, that doesn't seem. It does seem like they're latching now onto Walter Lux. We have a change for the lead.
Yeah, and there's Johan Harth. He has to abandon the ship as he goes through the final chicane there. Side by side, he was trying to hold. Now he's got to serve the slowdown penalty, and he was trying to keep his nose in, but Jacob Reed was having none of it, and now he's race leader, and he's got a gap of about 1.5 seconds to work with. Very cheeky there, but Jacob Reed retains the race lead now as he looks to move on into this race on lap 14 of 70. Johan Harth was trying to do everything he could to defend, and we'll take a look here along the casino straight, but this was purely a case of Jacob Reed commanding the corner.
Absolutely, you could just see there they head down the straight, the change for the lead. He just moves that inside line, he tries to cover it up, but by the time he has to move back, you know, it's so risky going too wide through there that Johan Hart just had to back out of that one and concede the place. There was no point in trying to fight that. He would have got a penalty or broken his car, so that's why he decided to go through the escape road. I think also Dennis Branch has retired the car. That car has been in the pit lane for a very, very lengthy amount of time.
Well, Johan Hart here is looking to be the fourth different winner in a row. Oh, sorry, the fifth different winner in a row. Actually, I'll correct myself for next time. 6 different winners in the last 6 races. Radice winning at VIR. It was Florian Kammerer at Sebring. At Imola, Jacob Reed. Long Beach was Joseph Lokes, and Emil Lundell picked up the victory at Barcelona. Johan Hart would make it not only 6 different winners this season, but 6 winners in the last 6. And Van Rensburg now finding himself through with the DRS flap not open for one Mr. James Byrne. Behind that, here's side by sides they go through. That's Ben Ford who's got the move done now on Florian Kammerer, who goes hot and cold at certain circuits over the course of the season. The driver second in the championship right now, at risk of losing that second place to Jacob Reed and that third place to Volta Lux if he's not careful.
Absolutely, you need to keep alert here to see if any other cars will potentially attack him. There are the standards of Eduardo Radis ahead of Jacob Reed, and Florian Kammerer will drop a position due to being here. Lux and also onto that as well. So it'll be super interesting how these turn out. George Van Rensburg, of course, now up to 12 points. He'll put himself in the line. Of course, that will unfold up Joseph Loke, the former FIA Formula 3 driver who now drives for Garage 59 in the Fanatec, well, not the Fanatec, the World Challenge. Great stuff there from Joseph.
Yeah, he's certainly done a great job. He's only turned up to 2 rounds this season. No surprises with the real-world schedule that he's under, but 1 victory at Long Beach is always very good. But the chops and changes always about here in this middle pack as it sits. So, again, close goes James Byrne, but not quite close enough to go and make that move. First season for James Byrne, 6th currently in the championship. He's got 2 second places to his name this season. He's certainly done a wonderful job at putting together a good opening platform right now, and he just glances the wall though coming through turn 3. He's got to be careful through 3 and 4 that he doesn't do that too often. The suspension very, very highly strong as expected in this machinery.
Absolutely, they need to really tune it to manage those curbs, because some of them can be quite high, and of course if you tap the curb too much, you're going to be hitting one of the sausage curbs. Meanwhile, this is the battle for 14. Mark Van Darden and Adam Ashroden got very much involved in two different battles, both coming off for worse, and that's why they're so far down the order with 2 sets of soft compound tires, and they also have another one scheduled as well, because those softs will not be able to make it to the end. So they're having their own mini battle over 0 point in the real life F1 championship standing that they would use. Yeah, it's not the place they want to be at this moment in time, and I think they're almost a minute behind Jacob Reed, which is also not going to help their moods either.
No, it's not going to give them much help right now, but they know that they will be scrapping here to try and get as much time as they can on the board. They're ahead of Robert Ridgway, they're ahead of Adam Webb and Kent Nielsen, who have made their stops, but they're trying to use those tyres. 1:17.4 last time by Mark Van Darlen. Still a full second a lap slower than Jacob Reed on tyres which are older out there at this point. So that's what they're dealing with currently at this stage, but looking to try and put together any form of recovery that they can, hoping that there will be an attrition rate that brings them back into the top 10. But it does have to be said, with the exceptions of Nick Burke and Dennis Branch, it has been a very clean race out there overall. There's some good scraps going on, like Vladimir Shumilov, for example, out there, who's brought himself into a battle, but still George Van Rensburg under pressure. Here comes James Byrne. He moves side by side, gets it done under the Dodge Bridge, and moves to make that pass.
Good move there. Oh, getting so close to the Water Champion. I think there's a little bit of tap there from James Byrne as he moves on through. Wow, I'd love to see a replay of that one, because how Wow, close to that one for the American driver. I think almost grazed it. So definitely that would have been on the side of the car once he jumps out of it at the end of lap 70. There we go. This is the replay we have. James Byrne on that inside line, so you'll get a tighter entryway. He managed to get back to it. I think just tried to power on there, and he did actually touch it. Just grazed it there, and so that would have left a mark there on the side of his Pirelli medium compound tyre. So that is a wild moment there for James Byrne. Very, very lucky boy to get away from that one.
Yeah, every time you clip the wall like that, you are panicking that you have got yourself in trouble and that you're going to be pretty much putting your front right tyre into the exposed concrete, which is there off of the exit. It is the big drama that always seems to bring itself into play, but these drivers all keeping their eyes firmly focused. Now here comes Ben Ford, who's been really working the midnight oil, so to speak, to get himself to close this down, and he immediately breezes on by and gets the pass done there on George Van Rensburg.
Yeah, I didn't expect Ben Ford to join on this battle, but it does seem like that both Byrne and Van Rensburg have both been holding each other up. I mean, we spoke about them trying to potentially go forward towards Walter Lutz, but it just hasn't happened for either of them. They've just found themselves in the clutches of Ben Ford. I wonder if Ford has been potentially saving. I don't suppose he would be saving any energy recovery system, because he's really had to use a lot to gain up the back of this little tussle of Byrne, and now he's going to have to try and get past that 5th place car, but he also has the potential there to save a bit of tyre, save a bit of ERS before going on the next attack.
Yep, and now we're starting to hit a bit of a lapping process here for some drivers at the front. So for drivers like Jacob Reed, he's now trying to get through this section and hope that Johan Hart doesn't follow. Oh, heavy over the anti-cut curb goes Robert Ridgway, and Johan Hart comfortably deals with that. Ken Nielsen now, the driver with the most starts in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour. This today, in terms of starts then going on for one Mr. Of course, here, Kent Nielsen. This will be his career start, if I can just pull it up. Yep, career start number 70 over the last 4 years.
That's a really great stat, actually, Jake. I'm really happy you mentioned it. I've just jumped in, to be honest, so I have very little information on these drivers, but you learn as you go. Come on, in this battle, Ben Ford now saying the fastest lap. So obviously he's been saving, as I've been saying, and got himself up to a really good place. This could be potentially a podium position if he can get the strategy right, if he can manage his pace, manage his tyres, manage his fuel, and everything above. He definitely has that opportunity to get onto the podium. He just needs to show some consistent pace. Whilst Eduardo Radis and Walter Lutz have been in the middle of nowhere, it seems like, especially Eduardo Radis. He's 9 seconds off the lead. He's got 5 seconds to Walter Lutz behind him, and he just not really got a lot to kind of push him forward. As a driver, you really want something pushing you along, and it just seems like for him there's not too much. It looks like one of our drivers in the pits there, that's Adam Ashralder, and I think there might be a little bit of damage for the Israeli driver. Yes, he's clipped the curb, it seems like, so I wonder if he'd potentially damage something on that F1 Mercedes W13 and actually stopped on the circuit.
Yeah, I think this is a case of I can't get anything out of this race, and because of that, I'm going to pull it over to one side and call it a day. So for Ashilzada, that is going to be that then in terms of challenge. So a retiree, your third retiree from this race here on lap 21 here out of 70, and it is still Jacob Reed who leads this field, but not by much. 1.3 from the man from the south of France, Johan Hart, who is there in second position trying to hunt down. You've then got Eduardo Radis, your championship leader, in third position. A little absent here today compared to the pace of the front two, but I would take 15 championship points when you've got a 35-point lead over the likes of Florian Kammerer down in 8th, and a 43-point championship lead over Jacob Reed. Yes, it would go down to 33, but you'd still have a race-winning margin, or one race margin, heading to round 11 of the season.
It's also about consistency in a championship like this in the GP Tour. Definitely trying to keep that third place would be so important. And meanwhile, the Austrian Walter Lux is now feeling pressure here from Ben Ford. So Ford has really managed to get himself up into a very competitive position. Lock up there in towards turn 2 for Walter Lux. And I feel like this is a very much an open opportunity here for Ben Ford, who is very much on the go-go juice at the minute to potentially get past that red and black Mercedes. I can really sense the move here happens to the next chicane, but it's about will he have the straight space?
Oh, yes, he will. Oh, look at this, because he'll move to the inside, and Ben Ford is absolutely motoring straight on through, and Volta Lux has nothing he can do about it. The Austrian falls behind. Ben Ford is up 8 places today, and now puts himself 4th with eyes of a podium, and Eduardo Radice in the distance. So that will be the next port of call for car number 16 here today, the 16th highest iRating out of 20. Your biggest mover overall, Edward Apariari, up double digits in 10th as Jacob Reed puts a 15.9 down.
Well, that's a really competitive lap time there for Jacob Reed. He's really starting to move in the right direction, opening that gap up to nearly 2 seconds on Johan Hart after that mistake. I think has started to fall back, maybe just ruined the tyres a little bit, whilst Jacob Reed was able to just save with the pace that he has underneath that car. As we see Vladimir Shumilov, who's currently sitting in the top 10 with Victor Aud, who's just running about 6 seconds behind him. There is Jason Green. He's also in a bit of no man's land as he looked to chase down the I think the lowest iRating out of all of them, Eric in the number 20, because as I said, he has got that lowest iRating.
Yeah, Eric Bursma, who is there in 20th position and, in 12th position in the number 20 car out there, having a okay run, qualified the car 9th, yes, -3 out there at this stage for this race, but we are not a million miles away from ourselves bringing into this all-important pit stop window. And as we look then at that little bit of a shimmy trying to deal with the traffic, Ben Ford is desperate to break away. That is Robert Ridgway. He's trying to get by and will do so on the front stretch and get that clearance. So that's important for Ben Ford and his race to go by. Track has cooled by 5 degrees Celsius over the first phase of this race, down to just 37 degrees out there. Overcast conditions in sim time heading over towards about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The track gets colder, it gets quicker, it gets more oversteery.
It will be interesting. Of course, a couple of years ago in iRacing, this would have been it. This would have been the race you were able to get. But we do now, in the modern day, 2025, we are able to potentially put rain into the mix. But yeah, what are you saying about that one, Jake?
Well, no rain in terms of these tyres that they've got. It's not yet applicable for this series at the moment, but the cold conditions still enough out there to cause dramas as Lux has a massive lock-up into Lepangle, turn number 10, out on track, and James Byrne gets a little sniff there in behind from 6th position, looking to move up into position number 5. So certainly trying to chase on down at this moment here, but again, first half of the chicane not going to do the job, but needing that second launch along the front stretch to gain closer. He's still not going to be quite there. 295 kilometers an hour on the brakes into the virage center, and not going to quite be there. And that gap at the front of the field now 1.3 seconds. So every time you start seeing it, the toughest gap to close in any race is 2 seconds down to 1. And we're seeing both Jacob Reed and Johan Hart over the course of this race find different abilities depending on how the tyre life is going.
It is really intriguing to see how these drivers are going at it, especially keeping within that between 1 and 2 second gap, as you say. It's so difficult because, of course, you do have that dirty air come into play, despite the W13 having these regulations where it was designed to have, I believe it was 10% less dirty air. But of course, it still exists. It still exists in Formula 1. But these are just aerodynamic monsters that have been created every single season, and it's just still there. It still happens off the back of these cars. You still struggle right but underneath those Formula cars. Really does seem like Johan Hart and Jacob Reed are doing a very good job, but you can see there a little bit of a brush of the outside wall there on the exit of turn 4 for Jacob Reed. The Brits very much trying to charge home on this one, but there's still a long way left to go in this Grand Prix. Wonder if he's very much going to be feeling that pressure from Johan Hart, or if he's just happy to just stick where he is. I definitely think that he does seem comfortable in the lead of this race, and with that lead experience will very much be some a really positive momentum for him. I think that will be very much a change into the mentality of how he approaches the rest of this race.
Well, at the moment, it is Worcester versus Ballaruc-les-Bains, which is just outside of Montpellier, over in the south of France, on the Côte d'Azur, so to speak, as everything looks to set itself in towards the first round, on the only round of pit stops that we've got here in this race. A gap that continues to remain rather close out there, and a difference there, 2/10 in the favour of Johan Hart, 1.2 over the line as they crossed. So that again gives a little bit of a sniff over to Hart that he can get closer and he can make some great progress. And I am keeping an eye out on the gaps that we've got currently between third and fourth, and that gap is starting to close because it's down to 3.5 seconds now between Ben Ford and Eduardo Radice. And Radice here doing 1:17s out there at this moment in time is by no means a threat. And in comes Edward Apariari, which will be the first real indication of a pit right now as strategy goes. Lap 27.
That's a very early stop there from Edward Apariari. I definitely think that might be a little bit too early, because having to push on those soft compound tyres for the remainder of this race, that's going to be such a tough ask on those soft compound tyres. I just don't know if they're going to be able to make it to the end with a lot of performance on them. So I think he's just trying to go for an undercut and then see if he can potentially just make a bit of a hold up within the last maybe 20 or 30 laps. We'll see. But there goes Johan Hart over the line, who's managed to find a bit more time and goes in there on the Englishman.
Yeah, and does so with a fastest lap of the race. Johan Hart has never driven in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour before. He will become, in terms of the overall history, the 308th different driver to take a start in this series at top split. But what he also knows is that Jacob Reed has 18 fastest laps to his name over his 52 starts. And now he will look around and say, you know what, I want one of them. I don't want you to go to number 19. I'd like that fastest lap, and more importantly, I want to steal that 23rd victory away, and that will be what we'll be trying to navigate through. Now, a black flag here for Walter Lux, who finds himself in all sorts of trouble, and that will be, I would expect, for speeding on pit exit as he went into the pits.
That's going to be a super frustrating thing there for Walter Lux, in a super promising position. Unfortunately, that slipped the finger with the button. Unfortunately, he's now got himself a black flag. That's going to be so crucial to this race. But something else that is crucial is Johan Hart just etching his nose towards the rear end there, Jacob Reed. This battle really heating up.
And that's a huge kick for the championship aspirations of Walter Lux here today, who's needing to try and bounce back after being on holiday last time out. George Van Rensburg will jump into the pits and will not know that Walter Lux is going to have to come in again and serve his penalty. Florian Kameyer also jumps into the pits, but Walter Lux will kick himself with that mistake off of the exit, because now as he trundles back in through the pits, as we watch the race lead battle right now, this becomes a case of damage limitation for car 5. On the brakes they go again. Reed just holding off Hart down at Lepangle, but now watch to see how this thread is going to change the other way. Will Johan Hart be uber aggressive the same way Jacob Reed was in towards that final chicane?
It's about being smart here, Jake. I think he's going to just shut that DRS as soon as just before he gets to the chicane. It's great racecraft here, but will he be able to get the exit off the chicane? It doesn't seem like he's there. He doesn't seem like he's got that ability to just find a spot here, but he will just close in there. I thought he was going to have a look down towards turn number 2, but obviously just trying to put himself in the mirror of Jacob Reed at this lead battle. Once again, it's gone one way. It's going to go the other way, it seems like, but of course it all kind of goes back to that start. Meanwhile, Ben Ford, a fastest lap there, 1:15.854 for the number 16 here, as he looks to go and gain here on Eduardo Reyes, and I wonder if that is just due to Reyes not having anything he wants out of this car. It just hasn't shown the pace that he would usually have. The Italian must be struggling behind the wheel of that W13.
Well, I think there was a little bit of DRS assistance out there from Jason Green and Ken Nielsen, but Ben Ford finds himself now right place, right time, and it took 8 tenths 2 laps ago, took 9 tenths a lap ago. Vladimir Shumilov now dives into the pits. Keep an eye on that, and also keep an eye on the race lead as well, which continues to be close each and every time. A little sniff into the final chicane for Johan Hart. He'll have another bite of the cherry here, going up towards turn number 1, thinks about it down the inside, just about covered, thinks about turn 2 again, and still it's not quite manifesting for the Frenchman.
No, it's not quite there for Johan Hart, but remember, he still had plenty of opportunities. This can be triggered with an undercut, but do you really want to go in that direction? I wonder if how close Ben Ford is to Eduardo Reyes. So remember, you can see there on the left-hand side with the driver numbers, Reyes had the 3rd most iRacing out of this whole entire field, and that is mighty impressive.
Oh.
Johan Hart is going to go for it potentially here. No, he decides to back out of that. How close was that, Jake?
Oh, as close as you like. He thought about it, and then he thought against it. They go by Mark Van Dalen. The lap traffic is there going to be a lunge down into the hairpin. Here comes Johan Hart, straight down the inside, but watch out. Straight back on the power comes Jacob Reed, and they go almost making contact as they go by. Who's got the DRS then on the straight? It's Johan Hart who's got it, but crucially in the tow is going to be Jacob Reed, holding himself as close as he dares. Hart gets the clearance that he wants. Big snap of oversteer by Jacob Reed there in the dirty air, and Hart has the race lead. Critical, but now here comes Ben Ford looking for 3rd as he goes by, and he'll comfortably pass the championship leader.
Has 2 big moves made in this race, and how good had this race been? Lap 32, and we're now seeing 2 moves made in roughly the same spot, and how good has this been? Superb fighting between those 2. I'm sure that will be going up on the socials later on, and I'm really looking forward to see how the race handles. How will Jacob Reed respond to that? How will Eduardo Reyes respond to his overtaken on Ben Ford, because Ford seems to be an absolute man on a mission.
He is flying. He's given a big heads-up gap to Johan Hart and Jacob Reed, but he's certainly got the pace here as Ben Ford, and he'll be looking to try and use that to the best of his ability over the curbs. Reed, though, still trying to hunt down, but Johan Hart at the right time, just before the pit window, wants track position, because this is one of the most aggressive pit entries of the season. You can throw it down on the accelerator each and every single time, and I wonder here whether Jacob Reed is playing a game of chicken here in terms of when they pit. I'll pit when you pit, sunshine.
It will very much be an opposite box here. Do whatever he doesn't do, it seems like, for one of those drivers. I wonder, it will just be about whoever goes into the pits first. I just wonder how it will be, will be coming out for both of them. It definitely be one of those where it could very much be the race decider, especially if there is a big gap between it. I think if minute that goes out to 2 seconds, I think we might have our winner confirmed, unless there is a huge speed advantage for the guy driving behind. But I do think that Ben Ford is still a threat in this race. The 3rd might be good enough for the Englishman, but you know that these guys are going to keep battling. They're going to keep battling on and on and on.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I wonder if Ford will be able to maybe close that gap just a little bit.
Well, there's another threat just setting the fastest lap of the race. James Byrne, who is going very, very aggressive on the soft tyres. He's only 24 seconds back of Eduardo Radice right now, so I think he could leapfrog him in the pit stops and get by Ben Ford as well. Victor Awad, by the way, has just left the box, and so we'll have his strategy all done and dusted for this, but they again remain close. Jacob Reed tucked up in underneath Johan Harth, a driver who does not need an introduction in any top series on iRacing. You find Johan Harth there, has been or had been a member of the Apex Racing team for the longest time, one of the great institutions out there in terms of sim racing, housing the likes of Ben Fuller, housing the likes of some of the greatest, Peter Berryman, Luke McEwen, have all been a part of that stable once upon a time. Now this is the stop by Volta Lux, and looks to get himself off and away, and he just releases the limiter slightly early, maybe about 10 meters early, and they caught him on the gun.
Yeah, that's going to be so crucial. You just saw there on the graphic, it said that he's down in P16, and you can see that on that left-hand side leaderboard. He is down in P16, a lap behind this battle of Johan Harth and Jacob Reed. Just gone from bad to worse there from Waterlux, but that really just shows how one mistake can really cost you an entire race. Meanwhile, this is starting to get once again a little bit spicy here. It looks like Johan Harth going for a little bit of a defensive into that first corner, but Jacob Reed happy to just sit in behind for now, unless he wants some clear air. Bit of a wiggle there from the rear of Johan Harth.
Well, I keep an eye out on Eduardo Radice, who has come in and made a stop, and crucially has come out ahead by 2 seconds here over James Byrne. So he's covered off in that stop, and Radice now needs to burn those tyres up, because he's got to try and get that leapfrog back on Ben Ford if he wants any hopes of a podium. That's a car around going through turn 3, and that is Victor Awad, who has just come out of the pits. Maybe cold tyres finding it there, but down the hill he's probably caught the anti-cut curb through 3 and 4, and somehow he's actually been able to keep it out of the barriers. I think he's just waiting for a clear part of the track to return to circuit, and he will do so.
Yeah, that I believe he must have caught something, one of the curves for sure, but I don't know if it'll be the one to the right to operate the swapper, or is it the left that just completely spun around. We'll get to see that one, and exactly the first one I thought it was. He clipped the left, that sent the rear into a very unhappy spin, swaps it back, and that is why the spin has happened for the Brazilian. He'll drop all the way down there to peak 16, so Volta Lux will be going in one place. Not unfortunately, it won't be the place that he wants.
Well, Volta Lux wants to get to at least the top 10 on races he started. He has not finished any lower than 4th this season. He's got 5 4th place finishes, 2 3rds and a 2nd over the course of this season so far, and that's why he's a championship contender. But for Victor Awad, he'll be a little sheepish after that spin, but crucially kept it out of the barriers somehow and able to continue. Robert Ridgway, by the way, still on some medium tyres out there at this point, and 3 at the front yet to pit, which is Harth, Reed and Ford at the moment, who are those 3 looking around and seeing what they can do. Ben Ford, by the way, dropped about 0.4 of a second on that last lap, 22 seconds that margin, and here is Volta Lux trying to get by Eric Bursma for position. That's Jason Green in the unsurprising green car in front. Both have DRS on the run here to turns 8 and 9, but Lux more confidence down the inside, easily dispatches of one and wants another.
Really good stuff there. I think these guys are just going to continue.
1 in, 1 out. Reed's in the pits. Harth has stayed out.
That's going to be the trigger there for Johan Harth. With Jacob Reed now in the pits, he's got to make this a good stop, with Johan Harth pushing with all that he can. Remember, it was Harth in front with Jacob Reed in second, so he would have noticed that in potential rear view mirror, and now we have a look here to see that stop being made, and we'll get this replay, and there you can see him ducking into the pit lane. Yes, he was seeing the second car to Johan Harth. You can see him just going straight into the pit lane. Whoa, very close to the rear end there of the Frenchman.
Well, here's the thing. He had to abandon a little bit diving into the pits, and Johan Harth is going to get a clean run into the pit so he can brake exactly where he wants to. That was the difficulty of Jacob Reed being behind as much as he was, but Harth does have traffic in front, and it's the form of Vladimir Shumilov. So if Shumilov doesn't yield on this straight, I don't think Johan Harth can exactly dive into the pits the way he wants to. He gets DRS on the straight, goes 312 kilometers an hour, 313, but as he hits the brakes, he's going to stay out for another lap. So this is crucial. Oh, what a wiggle by Johan Harth, just able enough to keep it out of the barriers. He is really going to have to push and now needs a bit of help from Vladimir Shumilov. It's not like other games out there where the blue flags mean jump out of the way. It is a responsibility of Johan Harth to get by Vladimir Shumilov as quickly as he can.
Yeah, I was going to say that through the chicane, and he's not going to be loving this one. He's got to get past Shumilov immediately, and I'm sure that this will be how crucial it is. Ben Ford into the pit lane. We'll see where he gets again. Of course, he'll be behind Jacob Reed already, so he's just got to try and keep himself in the third place as he goes into these onto this pit strategy. There goes Eduardo Radis, but it looks like he will be in front here for Ben Ford. But there
it's close.
It's so close. It is very, very close around the outside, but he's not going to get the move. Eduardo Radis with that undercut, and he's now going to be in front for this one. Good stuff there from the Italian.
Now remember, this isn't scanned to be a Grand Prix layout. This is scanned actually to be an IndyCar layout. So you get more pit boxes here around the circuit, Gilles Villeneuve. And because of that, it means that you spend longer transit on the lane than you would do in other games out there. So for Ben Ford, finds himself behind, has to take a lap or two now to get himself into position. That's James Byrne directly behind. But if he wants that podium, he's going to have to prize it away from Eduardo Radis out there at this point in time. It's a very, very critical phase of this race. Harth has got his clearance and is now finding himself then the ability through Shumilov, but he's now got to get by Robert Ridgway as well here in this one. And look at how that gap has completely dissolved as Van Dalen comes in for his second stop. 21 seconds only. The traffic not playing ball for Johan Harth.
Remember what we spoke about. Wow, that was a big, big moment there. But remember what we spoke about earlier. Between 20 and 23 seconds is the pit time loss around the circuit. Gilles Villeneuve, I think he's got to come in here, Jacob Reed, unless he wants to just sit in behind, but have much more tyres than Jacob Reed. It will just be that kind of that roll of the dice that will really decide his positioning as he will come in towards this final chicane here, and he will now go another lap round to start lap 40 of this race, over halfway into this Grand Prix, and the gap now just stands at 21 seconds. Jacob Reed has really just got to close this up if he wants to maintain a gap, but how close will it be? Well, I do not know, and I don't think we will know until Harth decides to come into that pit box.
Well, this is a very critical phase of this race. Jacob Reed has got to find lap after lap after lap, and he does a 1:15.4 there over that last attempt going through. And you compare that to the lap that Johan Harth has just had. That was a 1:16 flat, so he took 6/10 out of him. Difference on tyres there on that last lap. A big, big difference maker as it goes. But the question will also be, can you get the softs into an operating window to make that work? The track's gone down 8 degrees then out there overall. It's now 32 degrees, this track temperature. It keeps on dropping. And so can you get those softs working in a window that works where you can get the best out of the tyre in these conditions?
It will definitely be interesting because, of course, the weather has very much been changing all throughout this race. We saw at a moment where it was pretty sunny at the start of the race, but then it went into a very, very overcast shadow. But it now looks like the sun has pierced back out from the clouds. So track conditions are ever changing, and it will really decide what tyre to go on and how much. Can they push that tyre? Now, Johan Hart, will he come to the pits? It does not look like he will do so. And that gap now falling to within 20 seconds here for Jacob Reed. He might be able to get through here, but can Johan Hart, with those fresher tyres, be able to push on here? Because look at that gap. That is now going to be under 20 seconds in just a moment. There you go, 19.9. So Jacob Reed gaining 6/10, half a second, 6 seconds. Once again, that's almost the gap we were seeing when Ben Ford was gaining on Eduardo Radis. And speaking of Ben Ford, fast lap for the number 16.
Yeah, but he's not really gaining that much time here because he's got James Byrne who's holding the same pace, and Eduardo Radis only gained a 10th on that last lap. So the troubles are very much in play at this stage, but at least right now, Johan Hart and Jacob Reed, 1 and 2 in this race, and we wait on Johan Hart's decision for when he comes in, and he again has stayed out for another lap. So I think he's going to try and go something uber aggressive here late on in this race. Has a lot of confidence then, but look at how busy this is around with Jason Green. Oh, there's contact and into the barriers. That's Ben Ford, who finds himself caught up with the lap traffic as he went through. He'll be upset as he tried to drive on the exit, but just had to wait and was impatient with Jason Green going nowhere off the exit of turn 9.
Oh, that's such a horrible moment, and where the mentality will drop for Ben Ford. He's really got to now get into the pits.
He's damaged.
And make a stop. Oh, he is. Yeah, we saw the meatball flag as well, and that is going to be very much a horrible, horrible moment. I wonder if he'll be able to make it back out as well. So that will be mighty interesting to see. But yeah, that race is now completely ruined Ben Ford completely.
I think Eric Bursma just got on the radio and said, that crash is on me, not Jason Green. Don't take out all your issues on here. So Bursma here is the catalyst. So Bursma runs in deep, goes over the chicane, and Jason Green's got nowhere to go off the exit, and Ben Ford just tangles on the inside, trying so hard to stay out of trouble there. His first start as well, by the way, ever in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour, and it ends infamously for him in a way that he would not be happy about. So this is what Bursma's getting at here. So he's slow here as he runs into this section, and as Eduardo Radis goes by, that's quick, lets the traffic go, but then Jason Green jumps up on the scene, and suddenly everything concertina's up, and there's no room at the in on the exit.
I think also the driver there in the green car, I think just completely lost the rear as well.
Hart's pitted, by the way.
Well done on that one. But yeah, as I said, Jason Green, I think you just had a bit of a rear loss moment there as well, and that kind of pipped him in towards Ben Ford. So yeah, just a massive amount of unfortunate errors there, and wrong timing, wrong play for multiple drivers, I think, in that one. And Johan Hart comes out now 8/10 behind Jacob Reed, and this is now going to be the battle on. We're on lap 43 of 70, so they're really starting to close in now on those last couple of laps. And I just wonder, with the weather starting to change here, I think we've gone back to full overcast. Sun has now been covered, and this now allows those soft tyres to push the full distance. And speaking of pushing, that's exactly what Johan Hart is doing.
And through the issues with Victor Awad, with Ben Ford, for example, Volta Lux now finds himself in 10th place at this stage. Hart, 6 laps fresher tyres compared to Jacob Reed, and crucially did not drop outside of a second, and so now has given himself a brilliant platform to attack this final phase of the race. Jacob Reed, underdog while leading at the moment now, because Johan Hart has given himself a brilliant platform to attack at the moment. They are 18 seconds clear of Eduardo Radis at the front of this one, but for Johan Hart, he is stage hunting at the moment like it's the Tour de France, and he wants this over Jacob Reed, the 2-time champion.
Definitely, he really wants this one. Really just trying to use every single piece. See there, Jacob Reed almost scraping on the exit there at turn number 4, getting those tyre right up to the right-hand side. It looks like it's a, I was going to say a DNF potentially there for Ben Ford. I know Victor Awad has definitely retired, because you see that he's 7 laps down. I think Ben Ford might unfortunately call this quits, because I've not seen him leave the pits.
Yep, so he still has to clear that meatball flag, but that will take a very long time if it's not terminal damage, as it sometimes is declared if there's suspension damage to the car. Hart now bringing himself underneath the rear wing of Jacob Reed. How easy is this going to be made? There's two places you can get it done. You can either try here, which is this first section to make that pass, or the second. Look at Hart, look at Hart. He'll have to go the long way around. Jacob Reed just about covers it as he looks to get that drive off the exit. A big slide over the curb by Johan Hart that tempers the run, tries to use all the battery to defend, but Jacob Reed has just about got it covered through one, almost into two. There's almost contact between the top two in this race. Jacob Reed dancing about on a knife's edge, trying to hold this race lead together.
It's going to be super close for those two. They're really running the risks here between contact and finishing 1-2 here. And of course, they're really just in it to win it for the pair of them. You know, there's going to be nothing to say that they have to race safely. They're going to have to just run this one, and just with all the risks that come with, especially around a circuit like Gilles Villeneuve, it's nothing like your usual circuit. It's still one of them where you
here we go.
Oh, that's a big move there from Johan Hart, and he's seen the gap and absolutely gone for it. But now Jacob Reed will be looking for that DRS potentially.
He won't get it.
Down the wall. No, it won't.
No, the activation line is back there on the braking zone, so Jacob Reed can only use the slipstream, and he does well actually in that slipstream to bring himself closer. But now through that final chicane, there's where the dirty air comes into play. Now there's 4 lights on the dash, which indicates DRS is open. Jacob Reed now is going to have to fight from behind, but remember, Johan Hart has got much better tyre life compared to him, and that was a 1:15.2 fastest lap, making that pass.
And that's exactly what those soft tyres are allowing him to do. Of course, with the extra rubber that he has over Jacob Reed. Remember, Reed pitted quite early there compared to Johan Hart. I believe there was about 4 or 5 laps between them. And that 4 and 5 laps is making a difference, because look at the gap now. That is now on a second there between the two drivers. They're really working as a duo here. And my goodness me, their racecraft has been absolutely unbelievable. It's been second to none around here at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, and it's especially around like your usual, your normal circuits. You know, you like the Silverstone, just Spa. This has just added a little bit of a challenge because it is around a very tight street circuit.
Yeah, and now this becomes critical, because look at it, 1 second, but DRS comes into play. We'll pull it back 9 tenths, 8 tenths, and on the brakes, this is what's going to be needed here from Jacob Reed. He's just got to shadow the best that he possibly can at this phase of the race, because each and every other position is now going to be hard fought for through each and every single corner. This becomes a race where you've just got to stay on, and I know we're 24 laps away from the end of this race, but Johan Hart with a 1:14.7, absolutely ramp up blasting. He is right now that fastest lap of the race, and he is hunting for what he can. There is also other battles out there at the moment. For example, Edward Apariari right now finds himself just 2.5 seconds back off of Florian Kammerer, that the race for 6th.
Yeah, those two have been pretty silent during this race, of course, because, Florian Kammerer and Edward Apariari has been very much the lower part of the field. But whilst we've been focusing up on the likes of Hart, Reed, Radis, Byrne, Van Renberg, and also Ben Ford, these guys are very much climbing up the order. No DRS there for Jacob Reed either. He's not close to Johan Hart. They carried their way now toward the next lap here, but Hart, I think with that extra upper, just being able to pull away, applying pressure there to Jacob Reed, and we're going back really to the first square part of the race.
Yeah, and so now you start thinking about how Johan Hart looks to try and break away. This is Florian Kammerer, though, who's second in the championship. He has been nowhere today in terms of pace. He struggled here compared to some of the others around the circuit, Gilles Villeneuve, and I think he's a driver who has a lot more, I would say, ability out there to drive at at some of the higher downforce circuits. I think that's where he really plies his trade and does well. Got his first win in the Grand Prix Tour last year at Aragon, picked up victory at Sebring this year, which has given him a fantastic platform. But Edward Apari-Arié right now is the driver who is hunting, and a driver who has been trying to find that pace, has been trying to bring himself up to the highest level, but also a driver who has never had a top 5 in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour, despite the numerous amount of starts that Edward has had over the course of his sim racing career. This is his 33rd start today, looking for his first top 5, but first he's got to get to 6th.
Does, and it will be such a big result there for Edward Apari, because of course he's been very much really working this one. Meanwhile, Kent Nielsen and Mark Van Dalen, these two have had a collision earlier on in the opening stages of this race. That one was a lot cleaner, as Johan Haas over the line, 1:14.63 to 5. That is just blistering pace, but remember, the fuel slowly burning down, slowly the tyres in their prime at this moment in time. But again, Mark Van Dalen with the DRS, ahead now of Ken Nielsen, that they're just swapping the position like it's no man's business.
They certainly are, and Mark Van Dalen in 11th. This is just outside the points. They're relying on one top 10 retiree to make that change, and 9th and 10th in front of them, which are in front by about 15-20 seconds at this moment, are now battling for position. So Adam Webb is the one having to defend right now, because Volta Lux is looking to try and bring himself through. Yet to have a victory in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour is Volta Lux, which is very surprising with the way that he's always up there and contending, but he is a Mr. Consistency if ever you find one. Looking for drive off of the exit, and Adam Webb now might be a little bit sitting and duck with these double DRS zones.
He absolutely is here. Now Walter Lux, we said earlier, after he got his black flag, he was looking to go back into the top 10 and get some an actual world championship point, but he's now going to try and move potentially ahead of Adam Webb. Adam Webb has also had his own issues in these early stages, so you know, there's been a lot of drivers who have been caught up in these long endurance kind of races. Remember, it's 100% Grand Prix distance. They're so physical, especially in sim, because not just in real life where you have to be physically fit to drive these races. It's simulators too, because of course, yes, there may be no G-force, but you've got the force feedback, you've got the mental game of trying to push forward here, and I think there's also been a little bit of a touch
made.
Indeed, you're right there, Jay. Edward Apari-Arié and Florian Kahlmeier switching place on that one, and let's see if the number 10 can open up that gap.
Well, just as we say that, move made. Volta Lux now moves up to 9th position with the pass on Adam Webb. A lap ago, he was almost in the barriers, was Volta Lux, at the final chicane, the way he wiggled off of the exit of the corner. But crucially, he's now got 2 SimSpeed Championship points, and he's trying to get anything that he can. There's an extra 2 if you can get to Vladi Shumilov, who's 18 seconds down the road in the final 20 laps of this race. Tall order, but you'll need qualifying laps from this point onwards. A great pass by Edward Apari-Arié, and the big thing here for Edward is if he can keep the pace up, he's only 10 seconds back of George Van Rensburg, who I don't think is entirely safe right now in 5th place, but a great drive from George, who has statistically the most retirements now in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour, taking that mantra over from Kent Nielsen. He's been on a torrid run of form as of late, has George Van Rensburg. 3 straight retirements at Imola, Long Beach and Barcelona, and looking to break the hoodoo here today at Montreal.
Yeah, I think that'll be the best way to do it. That'll really get the camel off his back, and hopefully he can do that with some championship points. But he's really working it there in P5, and a really impressive run from him, especially being involved in those battles. He's been keeping himself consistent, and I think that's exactly what you need. You need that consistency, and it just seemed like around some very difficult circuits, he's had those DNS. But if he can just keep on the track, I really think that would be a huge improvement for his mental game, especially going into future rounds.
I certainly think it would do as well. George van Rensburg hasn't had a top 5 finish since last year's season finale at the Hockenheimring. It has been that long since he has found himself there, so call that a 10-race drought from the top 5 out there overall. And George van Rensburg is a top 10 in the championship driver year on year. So talk about that for having a tough season, because he will now move into the top 10 if he is to finish where he is right now. He'd move on to 27 points, and he jumped just behind Jason Anderson Jr. on countback, with Jason Anderson Jr.'s 3rd place finishes this season.
Yeah, really good stuff there from George van Rensburg. And meanwhile, Jason Anderson Jr., I'm sure he'll be hoping to come back with a vengeance after unfortunately missing tonight's race. But yeah, George van Rensburg, I think he can be happy with tonight. But again, there's still an absolute mission to try and keep it on the road for 18 laps.
Yep, so that's what his next game's going to be. Can I just find the finish, close it out over the course of this one? He's 15 seconds back of James Byrne, who's slowly dropping off the back of Eduardo Rodis. 5 seconds that gap between those two out there at the moment, and then those 20 seconds out there to the likes of Jacob Reed, who has stepped up his pace over that last lap. 14.8 for Jacob Reed meets a 14.8 of Johan Harth, so it steadies at 2.5 seconds out there at this stage, but still there is a long way to go, and the pressure is only going to continue here in the mid part of this season. So there is Johan Harth, who is stage hunting here today. Jacob Reed, you will look at this and go, Johan Harth's best friend here today is Eduardo Rodis, because it takes 7 championship points off the table, and if Johan Harth wasn't here, it would be a 4-point swing out there more that Eduardo Rodis would lose. So Rodis is very happy actually for the fact that Johan Harth is here today.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think there's been some really good driving between those guys, and I definitely think with Johan Harth, that pace has just been unbelievable in his second stint, which is still currently on. But you know, that could very easily slip away if he isn't careful. But Jacob Reed just doesn't seem to be the same Jacob Reed that we saw on those medium compound tyres. Lap 53, I believe we're on now, unless that makes a late switch. There you go, lap 54. They are currently sitting on, and the Frenchman now moved that gap to 2.5 seconds. That's probably the biggest we've seen. 2.3 seconds now. That going completely up there. I think maybe a mistake there from Jacob Reed. But yeah, as I was saying, Johan Harth has been having some absolute blistering pace, and that is the biggest gap we've probably seen since the start of this race.
Jacob Reed would have had his heart in his mouth going down the hill through turn 4. A massive wiggle over the curb on the exit, very nearly throwing himself in the wall trying to chase down the Frenchman. And he's got to start thinking championship at this point. It was at this stage last year where he stepped up to the top and said, I can do exactly what I want, moving on to an 8-race winning streak as he went on by and said, I can do this, and I can do this better than anybody else. That's what got him his 2nd title in what was a dominant display of driving. But this year he's got to settle down, take the points as and where he can, and know that Eduardo Rodis is limiting the damage at the moment. But these are circuits coming up that do favour Jacob Reed if last year was any form to go with, because next time we are racing, as Harth sets another fastest lap of the race, it will be the Red Bull Ring where these drivers find themselves in. Look at that lap, a 14.5 from Johan Harth.
A super lap time there from Harth, 1:14.5, which is an absolute blistering lap time for the Frenchman. Again, extended that gap up to 3.5 seconds, but now he has Jason Green in front of him, who will simply move alongside, and of course it will just let the Frenchman go straight on through, much easier than a couple of laps ago when Ben Ford was in contention. But of course that's a whole different story. That was a world away now. He's of course the 16 is now down, unfortunately, in 16, 10 laps down it seems like, and that meatball flag stop service, which must have been an age it felt like, and he's now out of this Grand Prix. So yes, Ben Ford is now DNF from this Red Bull. Head on to lap 56 with the Frenchman Johan Harth, who continues to build that lead up to 4 seconds. Does Jacob Reed have any response here, Jake?
not with those 6-lap pressure tyres that Johan Harth is clearly working well with out there in this race. I think Jacob Reed had to try and do something clever with his strategy, but it has bit him here today. I think he's going to now be reliant on a mistake or lap traffic having some form of issue in front of Johan Harth to get himself back into this race, because I doubt that we're going to be seeing this one go the way of the Worcesterman out there in this one. But he will take those points. I think he will be quite happy with the way that he's driven here today. But when you come up against a driver at the caliber of Johan Harth, who's got 10,000 iRacing, who has been in pretty much every top level sim racing championship that iRacing has been able to throw, and the likes of course of ESL as well that he's been able to put himself into with, he is a driver that you look at and go, he is one of the best sim racers in the world. And if that's the level that Jacob Reed is staying close to 55 laps in of an iRacing Grand Prix Tour event, I'd probably have to say that Jacob Reed is proving that he is a very talented sim racer when Johan Harth is one of the best in the world.
Yeah, I definitely keep an eye here on Jacob Green, especially going into the future races. Of course, I believe a young driver, from what I'm being told. You know, there's still plenty of time, still plenty of experience to be gained, and you know, as time goes on, he'll get faster, he will get more experience, he will know exactly what he needs to do when getting in a race car, and I'm sure that every single time he will pretty much be matching what Johan Harth can do now, maybe in a year or maybe a year or two's time, maybe even 6 months if his development is pretty rapid.
But he knows that his first and foremost challenge will be to try and get a third straight title here in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour, and to do that he's got to stop Eduardo Rodis, who is there in third position and will quietly take the points here today, I think, and will look to try and manage that margin that is there and dealing with. There's Vladimir Shumilov out there at the moment, 8th place, a lap down. He's got 9.9 seconds here over the likes of Volta Lux, but look at the rate of knots that Volta Lux is starting to hunt down Shumilov. So this is going to be a really, really tough run. Vladimir Shumilov, by the way, 3 starts in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour before today, has never finished in the points. His best finish is a 14th place finish, and so he'll be looking around at this thinking, I'm on for points, I don't want to do anything silly.
No, absolutely. He will just want to keep on the track as much as everyone else would want to do so. But it's just try and survive, especially with the fatigue that is now being kind of settling into the bodies of these sim races. You know, it starts to get to that really hard moment where you're just having a look at the lap count and thinking, when is the end of this race coming around? And it's just, it kind of goes in with that tough mental game. This is why you need to be really physically and mentally fit for the likes of these races, especially on a realistic game such as iRacing that sticks you in cockpit mode. It's just another level above anything else that you can kind of plug in and play.
Is the closest real-world driving experience. There's no doubts about it. Shumilov a little bit worried there going through that third chicane and looking to try and build up a little bit more margin as he's now trying to cover, but losing 1.2, 1.1, 1.3. Lux will have his eyes on 8th place and an extra 2 SimSpeed Championship points. If we can bring up the championship points on the right-hand side of your screen, he is going to be dropping here as Lux's Harth sets another fastest lap of the race, and this time a 14.4 on the board. Lux is going to be there on 1:10. He knows that if he gets those that 8th place, he'll be up onto 112 championship points, and he'd only be 10 points behind Florian Kammeier, and I would say he would also be 14 back of Jacob Reed, which is still very much within the wheelhouse that he's trying to work with here, which is to try and finish top 3 in this championship, doing what Anthony Catt did 2 seasons ago, which is stay consistent.
Yeah, that's exactly what you got to do there. And of course, climbing up to 12th, that is a superb result there for Johan Harth. He joins in into this league and of course gets 25 points, it seems like. But remember, there's still a little bit of the race left to go. I wonder if he has maybe and you drop the pace on this lap, but it doesn't seem like it with that fastest lap ticket just constantly flashing up. I mean, 1:14.6, 1:14.5, 14.4. I don't wouldn't be surprised if we see a 14.2 at some stage.
Well, as that fuel burns down lower and lower, there is more and more of a chance for that to be found. Robert Ridgway dives into the pits. He's 3 laps down currently in 15th position. He is the last runner in this field. 5 retirees from this race. Ben Ford in dramatic fashion tangling with Jason Green. Victor Awad then finds himself in out of this race. You've got Adam Ashilzada who pulled it over to the side, and then Dennis Branch and Nick Burke coming together in the early forays of this one to get that sorted. Ridgway out and away, not quite with a 76-minute pit stop. I don't think that's quite correct, but as Ridgway leaves the pits and looks to try and drive on forward, he will be back out and away again with a 28-second delta lane time there, which keeps him in 15th position and exactly a full lap behind his nearest competitor, Jason Green, in 14th.
Yeah, it's not the race that he wanted for the American driver Robert Ridgway, but of course there'll still be plenty of rounds left to go. As you say, we're headed off to the Red Bull Ring next time around, and of course that is going to be a completely different circuit compared to what we have currently with the as you say, with Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Let me just mention this first. Johan Harth, another fastest lap as well, 1:14.3. So that is a superb lap. But yeah, of course, the Red Bull Ring will host a whole new challenge. 9 or 10 corners to that circuit, a very, very high speed, and of course there's going to be plenty of overtaking opportunities. It usually does well in the Formula 1 game franchise. Always great for league racing, but of course iRacing a very, very different kind of kettle of fish, I should say, on that one. I wonder how the dynamics are going to the dynamics will change between Circuit Gilles Villeneuve and the Red Bull Ring.
Well, I think there'll be a lot of similarities and also a lot of differences that will come into mind going from place to place. You've got to be a lot more mindful when it comes to the track limits around here than you are at the Red Bull Ring. You know that you are trying to keep your race alive here around Montreal, and as such, this is going to be a circuit that brings itself into play as a much more dangerous circuit out there. I think you can be a lot more aggressive when it comes to racing action next time we are going to be with you. But for Volta Lux, he is still trying to hunt down that position. He is still trying to bring himself into a place where 8th is possible, and he is running 1:15.3s on that last lap. Took 1.6 out of Vladimir Shumilov. I don't need to be a mathematician to realize that Volta Lux is driving possessed at this moment to try and bring himself up into 8th position, and on that last lap took a 1.5 seconds away, and he's now got the gap down to 2.7. So in a couple laps, Volta Lux will have 8th place in sight.
Yeah, Shumilov just doesn't have the same pace that Volta Lux does, and of course he's got a fire in his belly from that earlier black flag to make up from his catastrophic that pit limiter incident that he got. We're now riding on board with the shoulder there. Still got a little bit of ERS remaining, but I think he may have to just fuel up just that a little bit before he then arrives on the back of Vladimir Shumilov. Of course, Shumilov should be a very open target, but then that will be the best he's unfortunately got. He turns away through the La Pagna hairpin, try and get as close to the wall as possible, but then accelerating out. He won't have DRS for now, but if he can gain another second as he usually does, then that will be a super, super positive. And already look at that. It's tenths he's gained throughout this lap, and I think that's going to go to another plus second now.
Yeah, and so as it drops under 2 seconds and he takes an absolute fortune out of that gap, going out of the final chicane, Volta Lux is just in hunt mode, and we'll be looking at this. That pit stop, he had to take an extra 40 seconds stationary in the lane. He also had to deal with the lane transit time. He dropped about a minute here in this field. If you consider that he's about 30 seconds off the back of Florian Kamar, 25 seconds, add 30 25 seconds onto that where Kamar is, he's just gone a lap down, I would put it that he would have been racing for about 3rd or 4th place here today, and he would have dropped about 10 championship points, which he knows that he will want back 12 if you consider that Kamar would lose the spot as well, as he's just gone 1 lap down in comparison to Johan Harth, which leaves all bar 6 drivers right now on the leading lap of this race. Looks now looking to try and really drive at 0.6 of a second. Shumilov now finds himself in trouble and will be looking wide-eyed in the wing mirrors because Lux is going to close down through this first straight. It's going to go through the final chicane, absolutely power it off the second, and will there be enough of a look here to go in towards turn number 1? He'll have to go the long way around to sweep to make it happen, and my word, he does.
Oh, that's a super move there from of course, Walter Lux. The Austrian is just driving, I say, Jake, like a man possessed behind the wheel of that Mercedes W13. It's been a super second half of this race there for Walter Lux, who's down in 16th place at one stage in this race, and makes it up and will take 4 Formula 1 World Championship points into his back pocket. I think that's the amount that he can make for now.
Yeah, and so having that opportunity, you now note that he's through, but that's about as far as the line goes for Walter Lux, because he's got to chase 25 seconds down on Florian Kamar, and that is going to be a tall order at the best of times. Then even now, we are down to just the final 6 laps of this race, and it really has set itself up at this stage of the season for drivers to try and hold on to what they can. Gap under 5 seconds right now for George van Rensburg, but nothing silly, and he gets it home and hose because Apariari is closing in for his first top 5 finish ever, but he needs help if he wants to get that over the line.
Yeah, but George van Rensburg, I think, will just have the throttle just a little bit, not quite fully on, just trying to keep the car on the road, because he knows, as you pointed out, Jake, how much this means to the South African. Apariari will have the pace, but he's just sitting there in the background. Will that be enough? He's going to have to really take almost a second out, which is exactly what he's doing. 6/10 down lap 61, 7.5 down lap 63. Let's see what lap 64 will be saying. It will take a little bit to load, as it of course this is iRacing, and usually it does. And there you go, another 6/10, but I don't know if that'll quite be enough entering these very latter stages of this Canadian Grand Prix for the Grand Prix Tour. And I think that George van Rensburg may just cross that line for the final time within less than a second, but it's just about keeping it on the road for the South Africa.
Well, that's one gap. Here's the other horrible gap, though, and it's 3 seconds for Edward Apariari. That's the gap between him and Johan Harth, who will look to try and put him 1 lap down in the final stages of this race. If he goes and drops the lap, he can kiss goodbye to a whole lap's worth of opportunity. He's just on the fringes of catching if he can stay on the leading lap. The issue he's got is that Johan Harth is right in the range to put him a lap down, and that would end any hopes of Edward Apariari finding that top 5.
It will be super interesting to see how Johan Haas times will be in those last couple of lap times, because George van Rensburg, he lost it from I thought he lost the front wing for a second there. I think it just went on the side there, but yeah, not quite there, just brushing the outside wall of the wall of champion, but that gap still coming down, less than 3.5 seconds there to the Brits, and the South African really just running his own race at this moment in time. I really do believe that he's really just trying to nerf that car home. No silly moves made there. He doesn't need to be involved in any other drivers' battles. But if Johan Harth can get past, of course, Edward Apariari, that would just be a whole host of absolute glee for the mouth of George van Rensburg.
Well, George van Rensburg, because of that final corner, did a 16.8, Apariari 15.8, Johan Harth 14.9. Now, if that's not frustrating, I don't know what is, because Harth is closing a second a lap quicker to Edward Apariari. He's closing a second a lap quicker to George van Rensburg, and they're going to be all over the top of each other in the final stages of this race if they're not careful. 2.6 the gap, and only half a second gone in the first two sectors then as they go through. Final chicane once more comes along for George van Rensburg on a 10-race drought of finding a top 5 finish on a streak of 3 straight retirements here in the Grand Prix Tour, and this time it's 0.8 of a second that's taken out, and the gap is 2.6 seconds now with 3 of their laps to go. It's 2 laps to go for Johan Harth. Now, if he's nice, he can lift off and let them battle it out for that top 5 finish, but Harth also has to remember, if he lifts off, he might lose concentration. That's where Jacob Reed could prey on the fallacy of Harth lifting off late.
It will be interesting, of course. It will be, as you say, with the leader being involved in a backmarker battle. You know, it's not really something you expect, but they'll both be aware of that 2-second lead, and I really do believe that George van Rensburg will just be hoping, praying, and really just crossing all of his fingers and toes that he manages to stay out in front here on this one. Half of the 11.5 second lead there to Jacob Reed, as Reed completely backs off on his lead battle, but overall this is the one we're really keeping an eye out for. Again, that the gap is going to close massively. 0.6 this time around. How much will that close by now?
Well, I'll correct myself. It's now 3 laps to go for George van Rensburg, and this time it's 0.9 of a second on that lap. That gap's closing. So too for the final SimSpeed Championship point, Adam Webb and Mark van Dalen. That gap is now down to 1.7 seconds too. So everywhere you look, there are battles closing in the final stages of this race. For the top 5, for the top 10, everybody is trying to hold on to their hats and keep an eye on that top 5, because Johan Harth is right there now with Edward Apariari, and if Edward is actually quite clever about this, it's let Johan Harth go through, follow him with the DRS, and use him as a pick to get by George van Rensburg.
It will be mighty there for some of those drivers, but yeah, that again, there's a top 10 battle. There's a world championship point on for this one between Adam Webb and Van Dalen, but there it goes, Johan Harth. Harth is going to get past now Edward Apariari, and now George van Rensburg will now have to potentially go about his pace.
Well, now this is where it gets scary here for George van Rensburg. He's going to have to try and let Johan Harth go through as the last lap of the race starts here in the middle of the St. Lawrence River. Right now, around this circuit, Gilles Villeneuve, it's about who's got enough pace, and that's a 14.1 by Johan Harth with the slipstream. He is really pushing on low fuel at this stage. Van Rensburg clears, but Apariari still isn't quite close enough. He's at 0.7 of a second, but he needs a very good middle sector of this lap to allow him the opportunity to attack into the final corners for that top 5. As far as the top 10 goes, Adam Webb is going to be under pressure on this final lap because Mark van Dalen's at 0.7. DRS was there to help for George van Rensburg, but it's still looking to close on in and close on in. Apariari will have one last throw of the dice to go and make this happen. This will be at the final chicane as they go through Casino Straight. Last chance to gamble. Big wheel spin though for Edward Apariari. That is that for Johan Harth. He has been stage hunting here today for the Grand Prix Tour. It's 6 different winners in 6 straight races. Johan Harth comes to the line and dominates here at the circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Van Rensburg will hold for his top 5. It's Jacob Reed who will get second, but crucially gain 3 championship points on Eduardo Radice heading over to the line. And for Mark van Dalen, he is through on Adam Webb, who has had a mistake on the final lap. He's got no rear wing. He's thrown it in the wall and will take the final point. Radice coming to the line will take third, and that is the damage on Adam Webb's car.
That is not a sight I expected to see on that last lap. Here is Eduardo Radice as he comes across the line. The championship leader will stay at the championship leader. He will keep his one race win advantage. Will very much be on for a superb result there for him. It's not quite the race that he wanted, but alas, he made it to the line, took 15 championship points, and that's exactly what he got. James Byrne will come home in 4th, as well as Adam Webb. Oh, Jesus. Oh, my goodness me there. Very, very close there to contact with another car, but Adam Webb there over the line, and that was going to be it for the 15 car. Very lucky not to fall in another position. Kent Wilson also there finishing 12th at his home circuit. But we've had an absolute stunner there at the circuit Gilles Villeneuve.
Well, let's take a look here. Adam Webb into the final chicane, hits that curb, aggressive to start. The back just gives away as he goes through. That's the hefty contact into the rear, and he's got to limp back for that final lap. Mark Van Dalen putting the pressure on Adam Webb, and he crumbles on the final lap of the race. Van Dalen will pick up the final SimSpeed Championship point. His best finish, by the way, was 3rd last year at Long Beach, which was a majestic podium for Mark Van Dalen when he was able to get that, but a point he will certainly carry in the back pocket. Let's get a look then at your official classified results then, here from the circuit Gilles Villeneuve in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour, and on a week 13 where we are between builds and some drivers don't have much to do. Johan Harth, 1 hour, 28 minutes, 49 seconds, takes victory by 13.5 over the 2-time reigning champion Jacob Reed. The championship leader will maintain his margin in 3rd with just 4 cars today on the leading lap. James Byrne would be the last one on the leading lap in 4th. George Van Rensburg breaks an 11-race streak as he now finds himself with a top 5 ahead of Edward Apari-Ari, still searching for his first top 5 there in 6th position. It will then be Florian Kammeier dropping points today in 7th, and so too Volta Lux, who had to take an extra stop after speeding on pit exit. Vladimir Shumilov will finish 9th for his first points in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour. He'll take 2 of them, and Mark Van Dalen takes that final point on the final lap as Adam Webb, as we go over the page, into 11th, finds that drama into the barriers. Kent Nielsen will take 12th, and Eric Bursma will finish 13th, 2 laps down. 2 laps down also would be Jason Green with Robert Ridgway 3 laps down, and 5 retirees from this 20-car field sees Ben Ford, who was on course for a podium here today, finding himself in the barriers after contact with Jason Green. Victor Alad finding spins. Ashel Zada not confident with the car after contact with Kent Nielsen on the opening lap. Dennis Branch and Nick Burt coming together, both would find retirements 10 and 11 laps into the race. And this will lead to the championship standings as they go. 166 for Eduardo Radice, a lead of 40 that he now holds. So he's still having that gap just chopped away a little bit. Eduardo Radice is on a very big drought when it comes to finding victories in this Grand Prix Tour. He hasn't won since VIR. He took 4 of the first 5 rounds of the season, but he's still scoring consistently here, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a superb end to the race there for our top 2 finish there. Florian Kammeier will hope to come back even better, stronger as they head into the Red Bull Ring. Walter Lux there, as you say, he did a superb job. Emil Burns, James Byrne, Jorge Martinez, and Jason Anderson Jr. the top 8. George Van Rensburg will take himself up to 9th with Emil Lundell in P10.
And there you see over the park. There you see over the page there, there Johan Harth moving up into 12th position through all that, and we see some of the drivers who have not been here today and those picking up points. 19 so far this season for Kent Nielsen, no improvements on that. Apari-Ari up to 18 championship points, the likes of Emily Van Camp we've seen over the course of this season, and Mario Bodlosh. The likes of Adam Webb will pick up an extra one, or was going to try and pick up an extra one. He stays with Alex Hagland in terms of points. The likes of Mark Van Dalen, for example, they're on 3 championship points, and Vladimir Shumilov, they're down on 0, as we got more drivers bringing themselves into play. These are drivers who have yet to score in the championship so far, the likes of Nikolai Rogovu, there, of course, a real-world driver, and all the way down at the bottom there, Ben Ford, another one who has yet to pick up a result so far after that being his first start of the season. But as we leave here in North America, we head to the Red Bull Ring, round 11 of the championship, and that is going to be in 2 weeks' time. So we'll be jumping around late June for that, the 29th of June. But the Red Bull Ring, a lot of similarities, but yet at the same time, a lot of differences. The difference in terms of pace is it's a hilly fast circuit.
It is going to be a massive challenge for these drivers. Of course, a completely different dynamic to the circuit Gilles Villeneuve. I think we're going to be seeing some awesome racing come next weekend. So definitely stay tuned. On the Friday the 29th of June at 7 p.m. we'll be live for the Austrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring.
And you can only catch that with us here on SimSpeed TV. If you haven't found it on YouTube, on Twitch, on Facebook, give a like, share, subscribe, everything you can to get some amazing sim racing your way. And it's not the only thing we've got here on SimSpeed on week 13, because Max Bantz is going to be in play. It may be the final one, so you'll definitely want to tune in and see whether that will be the case or not, as action will take place from Rudskogen tomorrow morning at 10 p.m. British summer time, 10 a.m. so to speak, 5 a.m. Eastern it will be. But as far as today's championship action goes, from Adam Reed and Daniel Yeaman, who's been in the production truck, my name has been Jake Sperry. It has been a very interesting season. It looked like it was plain sailing and it was going to be a one-driver championship when we started off through the first 5 rounds, but my, what a difference another 5 has made, because we've got 6 different race winners in our last 6 rounds, and 3 straight stage hunters have gone and picked up wins. If it wasn't Joseph Loke, if it wasn't Emil Lundell, it is now going to be Johan Harth who adds his name to the pantheon of drivers who have won in the Grand Prix Tour. But there is more than just that to keep in mind. There is that championship. Eduardo Rodis again picking up a podium, meaning he only drops 3 to Jacob Reed and technically builds his margin as we head in 2 weeks' time over towards the Red Bull Ring.
Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series in officially licensed cars engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.